Yes.
Okay, very good. Friends, it's a special meeting today, a joint meeting which demonstrates the bonding and cooperation between Madras Musings and Madras Book Club. V. Sriram will speak later about this bonding. The book of the evening is Half a Kilo Mixture, a compilation of 15 short stories by Ranjitha Ashok. Sushila Ravindranath will discuss the book with the author. Ranjitha says, the spicy Indian savory, which we call a mixture, has diverse ingredients, textures, and flavors. Likewise, the stories in her collection are a blend of varied emotions and experiences. Two of them are inspired by the Mahabharata. One of the stories uses Chennai Bhasha. The stories have come out of life experiences. I haven't created a fantasy land, she says. Gurcharan Das, businessman and author, says, I was charmed by these lively, alluring, and poignant stories. Their special quality is in the lightness of touch. Ranjitha Ashok hails from Bangalore, but has spent the last 3 decades in Chennai. She has contributed to Madras Musings for many years. She has assisted and collaborated with Mr. S. Muttaya on several book projects. She co-authored the book Office Chai Planters Brew with Mr. Muttaya. Another book, Chennai Latte, a Madras Brew, is a compilation of columns she did for Madras Musings for several years, along with cartoonist Biswajit Balasubramanian. She is also the author of the book, A World of Difference, Muduram Narayanan Center for Exceptional Children. Interacting with Ranjitha Ashok will be Sushila Ravindranath, one of Chennai's foremost journalists. She specializes in business journalism. During the 1980s, she used to be one of the stars of Business India, the magazine that rewrote business journalism in our country. She has also been associated with New Indian Express and Financial Express. She is the author of Surge, Tamil Nadu's Growth Story, a much acclaimed book and the best book on Tamil Nadu's business history. May now invite V. Sriram, editor of Madras Musings, to speak. Sushila will then launch the discussion with Ranjitha. Over to V. Sriram.
Thank you, Mr. Madhu. Mr. Muttaya would have been delighted today because of several reasons. One, that Ranjitha has written a book which is being discussed at the Madras Book Club. And certainly, Madras Book Club itself is an institution that was very close to his heart. Secondly, it's part of Madras Week celebrations. And thirdly, Madras Musings and Madras Book Club, 2 institutions among the several that he founded, are collaborating in today's event. Of course, he would have not approved of the fact that Madras Musings took it easy by not hosting a separate event this evening. And he would have said, no, I am not in favor of all this collaboration and all that. You have a separate event, let them have a separate event. We need to add to the numbers and all that. But then, we are having a pandemic and those excuses, and I'm sure he would understand. I have known Ranjitha ever since she was of the same height as she is today. And I have known Sushila Ravindranath also ever since she was taller than me by a few inches. And we were all part of Muttaya's chain gang. The ones who could be at the, who were expected to be available at any moment when inspiration struck him. And then if we didn't answer, he'd say, where do you people disappear? And we would have to say that we've got several other things to do. But, he always held Sushi and Ranjitha very close to his heart and was always very, very encouraging of all that they did, was father confessor, was guide, poet, philosopher, friend to them in every way, just as he was to me. It's just that they knew him much longer than what I knew him. And it gives me great delight that Madras Musings is part of this event. I thank the book club for, accepting that it could be part of the co-organized event for Madras Week celebrations. And so it's over to Sushi and Ranjitha for the discussion. Half a kilo mixture. And Ranjitha has promised that all of us who remain till the end will get half a kilo mixture delivered to our houses. Thank you. With Krishna sweets, badam also halwa also.
Great.
You're muted. Sushi, you're muted.
As I said, that was a bit excessive, but I'm delighted to be in conversation with Ranjitha. To start with, short story among fiction genre is my favorite genre. And also short story, I think, is one of the most difficult things to write, because it's a compact novel, it's a compact life experience, it's a compact history. Everything has to be said in a certain size. But for that, it needs extraordinary skill. And Ranjitha has put together 15 different short stories, which I think is really quite amazing. All of us who know Ranjitha and her writing always associate her with a touch of humor, whatever she writes. But these stories are also very light to read. When I say light, I'm not saying they are not serious stories. They are very serious. Some of them are very serious and very dark, but there is a lot of dark humor. You wouldn't associate Ranjitha with writing these serious stories, but some of them are quite gut-wrenching. And I think it's an extremely eclectic collection of stories. And let's take Ranjitha through this, how she happened to think of all these different ideas. Before that, Ranjitha, when we were talking, you said you sent your first draft to the chief. That's how we refer to Mr. S. Muthaiya. Tell me what his reaction was and what did you do? Did you change anything? Did you argue with him? What happened?
Thank you. Thank you for that, Sushi. Before we start, let me just thank V. Sriram, Madras Musings, and the Madras Book Club for giving me this opportunity. It really means so much. Thank you very much. Sushi, just yesterday I came across this book. I wasn't expecting to see it anywhere. And this was how my book looked in 2018. And I'd just written about 7 or 8 of the stories, maybe even less. And I wasn't sure whether it would work as a book, so I put it together. And I'm not sure if you knew this about Mr. Muthaiya, but he hated short stories as a genre. I have never understood why. We would argue about it for so many, like we were all on a library subcommittee together, and every month when we had to choose the books, if somebody brought a bunch of short story books, he would just throw the whole lot out and say no. He never explained to us why he didn't like short stories, but this did not appeal to him. So you can imagine how painful it must have been for him to go through this. And but I thought that the members of the Madras Book Club would love to see this. And then I found it. That's why I told you, Sushi, let's do this. At the end of this story, you can see how much he has scored out. At the end of each story, every page, his thick blue pencil would go through like that, because he always felt you should know exactly when your story is done, when you have finished speaking, whether you are giving a speech or whatever, you should know the point when you need to end. So that was something that he used to do here, scoring out right through. Then I remember there was this story which I was very proud about. He didn't like the title, Palimpsest. He didn't like the title and he scored through that. But you asked me whether I argued with him. Yes, I did, and I kept it for one of the stories. I thought I was being very clever, and I wrote this what I thought was a story about using Vidura from the Mahabharata as the central character. It's a story called Miranan. And Muthu's comment to that is, too much for me. You can see that right on top. That was his only comment, too much for me. But he made up for it by giving me this at the end of this particular story where he says, this I liked. And now this little booklet has become like a kind of a collector's item as far as I'm concerned. And since we were going to be talking about this book, I felt I should share this with the Madras Book Club because I know how much, Madras Musings and Madras Book Club, because I know how much he meant to all of them. And that's why I dedicated my book to him. And incidentally, the dedication is absolutely true. I did not make it up. When I put these stories together and I asked Mr. Muthaiya, I said, Muthu, what do you think? Do you think I should try and publish? His exact words actually were, in fact, I toned it down. His exact words were, yeah, absolutely. People publish and read any rubbish these days. Go ahead and do it. And that's exactly why I decided that I'm going to dedicate this book to him. Yeah.
No, he was the most encouraging and supportive of
absolutely,
all writers.
Absolutely. I mean, this was all just show.
Yeah. Every time I met him before I wrote my book, it was always, so when are you writing that book? That was the first question.
Exactly.
So, out of sheer panic, I think I started writing my book.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah.
So, Ranjitha, coming to your stories, the very first stories, one of the main characters is one of your very favorite authors, P.G. Wodehouse. Now, it's an amazing mix because P.G. Wodehouse is known for his comic writing, his fun, but this is a serious story. But it's Wodehouse who brings about the redemption. How did this happen? Was it a natural flow of thought, or did you think Wodehouse has to be a character in one of your stories? This is an amazing blend. How did you do it?
Thank you for that. Actually, this story grew out of an incident that this was many years ago, and it happened in Mumbai, where it was the exact situation where this girl was teased and two boys who were watching this happening jumped into the fray, tried to help the girl, and in that confusion, one of the boys died. And I remember the news channels went to town about it. I was watching news that evening, and this boy's father came on the news channel, and the sheer dignity with which this gentleman handled this completely horrific situation. He had lost a child that day. And that got me, somehow it never left my mind, it just got me thinking about the girl who was a completely innocent part of somebody's death. She didn't mean for it to happen. She was just there at the wrong place at the wrong time. Somebody else decides to tease her, decides to molest her. This boy comes in and he dies in the process. And the parent and that girl stayed in my mind for a very long time, Sushi. And you know how ideas get into your head and then they start floating upwards, like they kind of turn into stories, right? And then you have to write them down. And I think it was a natural flow because from there I was just thinking, what could possibly bring two people who inadvertently got involved in this tragedy? What could bring them together? Could it be an author of some kind? Could it be a writer? And when you think writer, for me, it's Wodehouse who comes first. And I was thinking maybe his world and his humor could start the healing process in this mother and this girl.
So as Mr. Madhu mentioned, you go from, very modern India to Mahabharata. The center incident of Mahabharata, the Draupadi story. And you say it from the viewpoint of the commoner, the domestic help, children. How did you do that? How did you choose that? And it's very difficult to put all that in a short story. How did you do that? How did that idea come to you? Let's look at it through not only an outsider's point of view, but truly, I don't know what other word to use, the commoner, people who were really observers from the outside.
Yeah, I sort of absorb mythology because I love mythology globally and of course our mythology, and every chance I get I try and read up as much as I can about it, research into it, everything. And the one thing that has struck me for years now is the fact that while the stories they blossom, they bloom, they give you so much to work with, no one ever talks about the people whose lives were completely torn apart by a situation they had not created. None of these people who lost their lives in the various wars that were fought had anything to do with the central plot of why those wars were fought, right? And that kind of got me thinking. And one day I read a short story by Mahashweta Devi, in which it's an absolutely stunning story. And she talks about, in the wax palace, there is a woman and her 5 sons who are killed, and people think that it's the Pandavas who have died because of that, right? But that was a tribal woman and her 5 sons, and the narrative was very convenient for the Pandavas. When Kunti and all of them go away to the forest at the end of the Mahabharata, when they retire and they go away, one day when Kunti is walking around outside, she meets women, and it turns out that they were the wives, the widowed wives of those 5 men who died in that fire. And Mahashweta Devi has created this absolutely amazing story around them and the anger within those 5 women. And one of them turns to Kunti and says that you were all so busy fighting your wars and doing everything. But did you think even for 1 minute about the woman who lost her life and those 5 men and the families that were destroyed because of that? You didn't spare even a second to think about them. And that story really impacted me. And that's when I started thinking about this. And I was thinking, it happened in the Mahabharata especially. And for me, the Mahabharata is the ultimate epic and it's the ultimate story. So I keep going back to it one way or the other. And that's how this story came about. And the voices just came, girls working in the palace, the little villages outside that supply the palace with various things, etc. What did they do? How did they survive the war?
That was rather, the description of Draupadi was amazing. And the little girl's reaction to her. I'm not going chronologically. And you've also done this short story on Vidura, the character not too many people talk about. So that was also fascination in Mahabharata or Vidura character. How did you choose, among the hundreds of, as you say, Mahabharata is full of short story possibilities. How did you choose this?
I've always found Vidura a very enigmatic character. And I've always felt that there was a lot more to him than came out. I mean, of course,
you can get it on the computer.
He's a very big character in the Mahabharata, and he's certainly a central figure.
It's on she sent it on the email.
Excuse me, can you, Sheila, can you mute
me?
me?
Sorry. Oh,
Sheila,
sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry about that. So it just grew that way, in my fascination about the Mahabharata, my fascination with Vidura as a character, what was going on inside Vidura's mind? And that's why I think I thought of, I came across this word Miranim, and I really felt that it described Vidura very well. And there's a little story over here. Would you believe, I just sent an email out of the blue. Gurcharan Das, Mr. Gurcharan Das had just published his book, The Difficulty of Being Good. And I just finished reading that. And when I found this word Miranim, I just wrote to him just out of the blue. He doesn't know me, I don't know him. And I said, sir, would you consider Miranim a good word for Vidura? And he wrote back very sweetly. He immediately replied saying, yes, I think Miranim describes Vidura very well because it comes between an antonym and a synonym. So he takes the middle path always. So the story grew from there. It's just Vidura's internal conversation. There is really no story in that story. Yeah.
No, which is quite fascinating. As I said, Vidura is not somebody, we know he's an important character. He's a decision maker. Everybody turns to him. But it's very nice that his internal conversation is brought out. And from Mahabharata to Madras Bhasha, Bangal. I can't associate you with Madras Bhasha. How did that short story happen?
Yeah, I know.
It's very funny. It's a lovable thief. It's like funny each line. Tell me. And please also read something out of it. We want to hear you.
Oh, okay. The thing is, I just love the Madras Bhasha. I mean, I think it is the most fascinating language possible. And this language has personality, it has funk, it has chutzpah, and it is such a fascinating mix of all the different cultures that flow through Madras, right? So for me, I've always loved the Bhasha. And this again happened because this is how stories form, Sushi. It's amazing how it happens. This actually happened to a couple of friends of mine who own a small little property in Kodaikanal. And one day, this friend of mine, Uma, told me this story, saying that you won't believe what happened. Our property was, somebody tried to steal something from our property. A thief broke in, and she laughed and laughed, and she said, would you believe it? Imagine that thief, he came to our house to steal something when there's absolutely nothing there. All he would have found was a gas regulator. She was making a joke out of it, but it just again, something that just caught on in my mind. And I was thinking, imagine the state of that thief, right? He takes all the trouble to go into somebody's house. He does all of it and he ends up with a single gas regulator. What would have been his thoughts? How shattered would he have been and how betrayed would he have felt of life by life itself? And that's how that story grew. And then, the name and everything just fell into place. Once you start the story, it starts writing itself. So it just fell into place. Do you really want me to read something from?
I think that, yeah, you should.
You have to give me a minute because I haven't really. Okay, I'll just read a very small piece. Now, this poor thief is completely shattered. He did not find what he wanted in the house that he was trying to rob. So in utter disgust, he lands up at a tea kada and he is sharing his very sad story with some of the people he sees there. Brother, I should not even be here, okay, va? I should have been born in England, America. Born off here by mistake. My father gave me big name, Perumal Elvis Ganeshan. You're surprised? Sharma name, no? But what did I do? I became small thief only, very small, Tamatunda. Now you look shocked, brother. Yes, I'm thief, opener, I will say. What is there to hide and cover with lid? I'm thief with special name. See, my father had too much feeling when I was born because that time itself my mother became died. Parrot astrologer telling him that I become very big man someday, in spite of swallowing my mother when being born. So father thinking he must give me big, big names. Perumal, big man in the sky. Then Elvis, very big singer it seems. See, sometimes father used to go for work in garden of big house in Boat Club area. That house son returned back from America, it seems, and used to go on listening to this singer. His mother scolding, and one day mother-son had a big fight. Mother shouting that if he did Aarti to God picture, instead of all this time putting this Elvis Gilvis on his bedroom walls, then maybe he would have become married by now. Three children also, who knows? And the son shouted, Elvis is king. So my father remembering and naming me for a white-skinned singer king. And Ganeshan, see, he was fully mad over both actors, Shivaji and Gemini. So he thought, why to choose? Simply keep off both, that's all. How my father will know how my life will go? That astrologer soon after becomes sick after big wedding lunch in his native place and died off. Parrot escaped off. Otherwise, let me tell you, I would have found that fraud and broken all his tools. Why you yourself don't know you were going to eat too much and die? Tell me, let me see. I would have nicely asked. And then I just end the story where he says, you remember my story and understand, okay, va, life, very danger party. Must be usharo every minute. Tomorrow we meet. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows?
Thank you, Ranjitha. That was lovely.
Thank you.
Before we go to other stories, tell me about this whole process. How does a short story form in your mind? It's about life experience or it's some imaginary incident, or because this is, as I said, it really covers everybody. It covers, middle class existence, middle class women, upper class women. I love that story about shopping. We'll come to that later. So tell me, how does this process? How did you, because putting together 15 short stories, I know is no easy task. It's a most difficult genre to write. Tell me how it all fell into place, how long it took you to write these stories, from where did they emerge from, where did they spring from? Tell us, take us through that process.
That's a really, it's a tough question to answer because these stories were not written like over 2 or 3 years, right? I mean, like some of them I wrote a long time ago and they were just sitting in my laptop simply because I didn't know what I was supposed to do with them. And they grow. How do the ideas come? It could be anything, Sushi. It could be somebody you meet, you see an expression on someone's face. It could be something you read in the newspaper. It could be a book that you've come across. So it could be ideas that have been fermenting in your mind for a long time. And once it takes hold, it just becomes this heaviness in your mind until you set it down. You're a writer, until you write it out of your system, it's not going to leave you in peace. And then it kind of grows and develops from there. Yeah.
So it's been a 7-year process, really.
Yeah, it has been a long time. Some of them were even older, and but I think the most intense writing was really done over the last 4 to 5 years. Yeah.
So you also describe small towns so beautifully. I forget the name of the title, The Doll.
You're talking about doll, yeah.
Yeah, where they go have a holiday in this old house. It's all perfect. These two women who are single, one is a widow, the other is a single woman obsession. When I read it, I could recall, some distant past, knowing people like that, living this kind of life, and, people who are knitting and, giving us bags, and, people one didn't relate to, but one knew them. So tell me about that. One could relate to that little girl very well, although it was never inflicted on us. I'm sure it wasn't on you. But that entire atmosphere, I mean, have you gone to small towns, lived in relations' houses like that? It was just so evocative.
It's like I think people of our generation will remember grandaunts and grandmothers who came from this kind of a background, right? I'm not sure how much it would appeal to some. I'm not even sure how much some younger girl today would even be able to connect with some of those concepts. But I think ours was probably the last generation that even had a glimpse of that lifestyle. May not have actually experienced it, but certainly had a glimpse of that lifestyle. And there was always so much drama. And all of this comes out of you go to your grandaunt's house for a summer visit, you go to your grandparents' house for a summer visit, okay? And quite often you're the city kid who's going to a small town. So there's a little bit of a showing off that happens. This I think has happened to all of us when we go home, so to speak. And I think as far as the girl's character is concerned, certainly in India, and certainly, like I said, with our generation, it probably ended with our generation, there was always that moment. I don't think boys faced it, but I think with girls, I'm not even saying from girlhood to womanhood, I'm saying from child to girlhood. There was a sudden, subtle change in the way people began to talk to you.
And Pattu Pavade was a very major thing.
Sorry?
Pattu Pavade was a very major thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, and I mean, I'm not sure how much this would even resonate with the guys, but honestly, this was a big issue for some of us because we suddenly, with a grandmother or a grandaunt whom we used to be so close to, suddenly became like somebody on the opposition, right? Because she was arguing with you about what you wore. She was arguing with you about how you wore your hair. Everything was becoming an argument. And it was, in your mind, it was like it was something that happened overnight. You couldn't understand where this came from, right? I'm still the same person you knew. I'm still the same person you petted 6 months ago. What's happened now? Exactly. Somebody has written sudden lifestyle shift, and that's exactly what it was. But you were not ready for it. You're the child in the equation. And this is something I think many adults tend to forget. Don't put the burden of making changes and decisions on the child in the relationship. You set the tone of how this relationship needs to progress. Don't put the burden on the younger person, but quite often the burden was put on the younger person. And that's what created so much anger in that girl, and a girl who just wants, she's just like any other girl. They just allow so much anger to build up in somebody who was not even ready for it. She just didn't know where to turn after that. And that's why she erupts in an act of violence, and she needs to repair it many years later.
See, I don't know whether it was conscious or not, but this is really about women. A lot of the short stories are about women. Did you set about doing it, or it just happened?
Nah,
like
it just
middle class
happened.
women, their liberation in the end, and there's someone who's cooking for everybody. I love the end. I don't want to reveal the end. Who just generation. It just happens. It's like even the slightly esoteric women are all women oriented. So, but at the same time, I wouldn't call it a feminist short story collection or anything, but it's very women oriented. Tell me how that happened.
It was not conscious, Sushi. At no point did I set out to write, I'm going to write a bunch of stories about women and all that they suffer. No, not at all, not even a bit. These were little sparks, little incidents, little things that, that came to my mind, and the story grew around it. It really came out like that. It was never anything conscious, no. And it was not so, I think it really came out of experiences and things that I had observed around me even as a child. A lot of those experiences are not personal, but I had watched people, and I always wondered what went on in their minds, because I always felt there was this facade that the family expected of them and what they were required to do and everything. But what actually went on in their minds? And I was very curious about that. And if they got a chance to do something for themselves, what is the step that they would take? Would they even be prepared for it? Because even to know that you can change something that you don't like is a power that you sometimes don't even know you possess, because you have to be educated to know that you have that power. If you've been told right from the beginning and you've been made to believe that you don't have that power, you're never going to realize that you could have changed things if you had wanted. But you didn't.
You really make it so real, because this happened with educated women also of certain generation. It didn't make any difference. There was all this mother-in-law, daughter-in-law, respect clashes. The mother wouldn't support the child. It was all like happening around us.
It's the educated women. I'm not talking about, the setting is largely, it's urban, right?
It's urban,
it's very urban. So yes, educated women. People I know. Yeah.
Yeah, some spark makes you write a short story, not exactly about them, but
exactly.
It's also about this upper middle class lady going shopping and, having all these thoughts. Dare I ask you, is it Amanana?
A lot of people have asked me that, and actually I think, maybe it was. Because I think I did have Amanana in my mind. Yeah, possibly it was. Yeah, because there's a certain kind of shopper that goes to Amanana, right? And you can
just effortlessly fix up all these Western ingredients and pasta and things about dessert.
Yes, but she still knows her Manata Kalika, and she still knows all of that, and she has that life going also. So these lives are going parallel at any given point. Yeah,
it's again a generational thing. I don't know how many of them exist anymore.
Yeah.
Kind of. Now I must ask you. Chief is in 2 stories. Was it also deliberate, or when you started writing the story? One of them is a very moving story. The other is, of course, the tribute, which is so many people, you've done it so well. You read about it, I think I know this person, but it's not that person. Let's talk about the Jasmine.
It's never any one real person.
Never any one person.
I mean, it's like a mix, right? I mean, it's a kind of what's the word? It's a sort of can I say, like a kind of an informed imagination, where you take facets from people, you take certain characteristics maybe, and you maybe take certain stereotypes also, very stereotypical situations that come up, and then you kind of put it all together. A lot of people have seen the Chief walk through that book. Yes. Yeah, maybe he has. I don't know. I really don't know how to answer.
No, one is obviously the Chief.
Okay.
I mean, one can imagine him saying those things and this woman coming, talking to him, and maybe you or me having a conversation with him.
It can happen. A lot of people have seen it like that. In fact, they've told me quite clearly, that was you, wasn't it? Having a conversation with Mr. Muthaiya. And I really don't know how to answer. So I just say, yeah, well, maybe it was. Yeah.
No, what I want to know is, when you started writing the stories, did you want to have Mr. Muthaiya to be a part of the stories?
No.
It just happened.
It just happened. Because it was like something would happen, and I would say, if there was a tribute of some kind, if there was a program of an event of some kind, and all these people are saying all these things, but what's actually going on in there? For me, that's the most fascinating part in any situation, Sushi. What is actually going on in someone's mind behind the masks that we put on? I've always found that fascinating, and when you watch, when you observe, you see the drama, you see the stories, and it all comes out.
Because the tribute really, I needn't tell you, brought out so many memories. So, but the one where he's telling the story, I mean, what's the title? Jasmine, a longish story of this woman who was suppressed, but who collected papers and, who discovers this woman writer. That's a fascinating story. What was that inspiration?
Many years ago, this strangely comes out of the Mahabharata again. An uncle of mine, who was already at that point, not an uncle, a grand uncle, he was in his 90s then. and he was going blind. And one day when we were just sitting and chatting, he said, you know, when I was a little boy, my grandmother, so you can imagine how far back he's talking about, my grandmother used to sing a song in Telugu called Pandu Pata, and it came out of the Mahabharata. Okay, and he said, you know, I've never been able to get my hands on that song, and it would have been so nice if I had, or something. It was just a very general conversation, and like always, something gets into my head and holds on to it like some kind of a barnacle, and it refuses to let go. And I decided I had to find out, I had to trace that song for him one way or the other. So I made a complete nuisance of myself, called up everybody I know, dancers, musicians, everyone I could think of. I finally managed to trace the song. It's a Telugu song that was written many, many years ago. A Sanskrit Telugu professor in Kengeri in Bangalore University, actually had the song. And I was able to get hold of him. And I went to Bangalore, went to Kengeri, and this very kind professorial gentleman had actually, you know, sort of, what do you call it, typed out the song for me. And he gave it to me, and it's out of print. Nobody knows that song anymore. But I was so thrilled that I was able to do this for my uncle, and I found the song that his grandmother used to sing to him. And again, like I said, that stayed in my mind. And I said, okay, supposing somebody goes looking for a song, what can happen? And then, you know, then the characters come up, and then the story begins to build. What is the background? What really happens? And how do you bring it all together? So that's how that story happened.
Because it's an amazingly feminist story.
And the other inspiration was actually the Roja Muttaya library.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I did a piece on Roja Muttaya library for Mr. Muttaya for Madras Musings many years ago, and I always felt that there was a huge story sitting there, because it was all so wonderful. You know, the gentleman collecting pamphlets and papers, and slowly this library grows, and you have these wonderful people like C.S. Lakshmi and all who get involved, and then it becomes this, you know, this great place that everybody goes to. So I think somewhere these two stories kind of mix together, and that's how that story happened.
I should have said it at the beginning, but I must tell you, this is a wonderful title.
Which one?
Your book title is wonderful. It is so perfect.
Thank you.
It's mixture. We all like mixture, one way or the other. So there's
and it's quintessentially South, isn't it? It's such a South word to use, mixture.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
Mixture chapter 4. You know, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, you know, a lot of these short stories have potential to be a novel. You didn't want to write a novel?
No, Sushila.
How did you? I mean, it would have taken you the same time, but tell me, why did you choose the short story? I mean, each one has a theme which can be expanded. There are characters who are interesting. Sometimes within a short story, you span a lifetime. Sometimes it's like the lady shopping. It's just a matter of an hour or two. So how did...
I never...
What do you think of novel as a genre? You don't think it is yours, or is your next attempt going to be a novel?
Maybe I should. I don't know. I haven't thought about it. But maybe, as you said, maybe ideas that are contained in this book could develop and grow, and, you know, maybe take it to a novel. Maybe that's something to think about. But while writing the book, it was only short stories. I didn't think of expanding any of it. I knew where this was going to end, and I was very clear about the ending. And that's invariably how I begin. I first find the ending, you know, and once I know that I have to get there, then I find my path. I find my way to that place. Yeah.
So this story, which is possibly your longest story, God, the magic, a river.
Oh,
a
yeah.
river waits.
Yeah.
It's full of magic realism.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Again, you know, is it a concept? Had it been working in your mind, or I mean, it's environmentally conscious. It's got these very different characters, and you know, there is an air of mystique about it. Who are these people? Why are they doing this? You know, where was that inspiration from? It's like, obviously you want to do something for the environment. We are all worried about rivers drying and all those, you know, old sculptures and old villages, small towns where these exist, and all those extremely exotic and interesting characters. They are not your everyday characters.
I think among my various obsessions, two of them are the Indus Valley civilization and the Saraswati River. And in my mind, even as a child, I used to make up these fables about this whole thing because there's so much mystery, and there's so much mystery about the language and what happened and the theories and all the rest of it. And I think it was as simple as that, Sushi. And then I read books like Michael Danino's book, right, The Lost River. And all of them inspired me. And I said, I think there is a story over here and I need to pin it down. And then it sort of grew out of that. Yeah, grew out of that.
But it is, did you think that's the story which made me think there is a novel there, because it is a long short story. So
that story wouldn't stop writing, I didn't plan on writing forever and forever. In fact, people did ask me, good heavens, do you know how many words there are? People I sent the stories to, and I said, I didn't even realize it, but it just wouldn't stop. It literally wouldn't stop writing. I didn't realize that I would end up writing a poem in the middle of it, and I would end up doing all of that. None of that was planned, but it just went on and on until it decided to conclude. Seriously, so that was it was much longer than I expected it to be. Really.
Tell me, who are your favorite short story writers? Were you inspired by anybody? I can tell you immediately. Mine is Alice Munro.
Alice Munro, yeah, of course. Well, I think going back to my childhood and girlhood, I would love to, as girls do at that middle school, high school level, you just want to weep and weep and weep and enjoy yourself crying over a book, isn't it? So I think I would probably start off with O. Henry, and then go to Saki, and it's very hard. It's like, for example, Maupassant's Necklace. The minute you say short story, what are the stories that spring to mind? I think that's an easier way to decide what was maybe an unconscious kind of an inspiration, because you didn't set out to be inspired by anything. So I think these were the writers. Chekhov, who believed Somerset Maugham. So yeah, plenty. And at home, I would say R.K. Narayan and Chudamani, all of them. Again, slice of life.
So you like short stories as a genre?
Yes, I do. Actually, I do, yes.
Now
unlike Mr. Muthaiya, yeah.
Yes. Another difficult question, it's like ask you, which one is your favorite child? So which is your favorite story among these?
I really, honestly, I will never be able to pick and choose, because how do you choose between, how do I choose between them? I can't. I don't think I can.
No, when you were writing one of the stories, which did you feel was closest to your heart? I mean,
I think the Madras Bhasha one. I would say the Madras Bhasha one. The Woodhouse one and the Madras Bhasha one probably came easiest. They
wrote by themselves.
Access. Yeah, they were very easy to access. Yeah.
So tell me, why don't you read from one of your last three stories, which are again very moving, very dark. I found the departure extremely, a real true example of dark humor. Whichever is your favorite story, I think you should. Would you like to read from Departure or the?
Yeah, I could read from Departure if you like. This is, maybe I need to give a little bit of a background so people know what I'm talking about. This lady has just died, and she has just found out that, much to her own horror. And then she has a conversation with an emissary who's come to take her back to wherever you're supposed to go. So, lightness, floating. So a dream then. Would the next sensation be that dreadful falling one? Whoops, there it is. Hang on, this doesn't feel like falling, more like tumbling over and over. Easy now. Where's the dining table? What am I doing? Lying on the ground in the center of the room where the dining table should have been, surrounded by people? And why do so many of them seem to have colds, running noses, red eyes? Why is there so much footwear scattered around the entrance? I'm hovering. Dear God, who hovers? Have I turned into a bird or a butterfly or something? This is a dream. It has to be. No, it isn't, and you haven't. Not yet anyway. The voice is soft, amused. I spin around and the movement flings me high over the footwear, making me gasp, choke, and flip over. The voice warns, careful, not to worry. It just takes some getting used to, but you'll soon learn to control movement and be able to glide gracefully. Who's speaking? I gasped. Really? Is this an old-fashioned phone call? The voice is mocking. Stop it, I gasped again. This is not funny. You're scaring me half to death. This time, the voice laughs out loud. Well, that's something you needn't worry about for some time at least, unless head office decides you need to start the whole process again very soon. I suddenly realize how cold I am and I shiver. The voice gentles. Something like that looks like a streak of light, more like a jagged piece of bright cloth, seems to be flying by my side. No real shape, but I sense a presence. The light smiles. What's going on? I whisper. I think you know, the light answers. For a moment, I'm silent. Yes, perhaps I do. Is this how it feels? A kind of a surprise to realize you're dead? The thought swells gradually in my mind like a wave in slow motion. Always, I turn towards the voice. Did I say that out loud? Over here, it makes no difference. When did this happen? I ask. Last evening, but it's been coming, as you know. I nod. I suddenly begin to shake and the light moves closer and wraps gently around me. So everyone down there is here to, yes, to pay their respects. And you are, oh, I'm just here to help you on your journey back. Head office has become very aware, over the centuries, very sensitive, caring. They've gone all HR, lots of buzzwords flying around. So many consultants making it back these days, you see. They tend to make their presence felt, these guys. The light dims for a second. What happens now? You come with me. We've tried to ease up on all the crossover bureaucracy. You'll be guided through the process of returning home. Home, but this is, I stop. You're beginning to understand, the light nods. Actually, you're beginning to remember, to see. My voice begins to tremble. I'm not ready. You are, says the voice. But I have so much to do. Like what? Well, for one thing, I didn't straighten my cupboards, I state triumphantly. People have always called me the uber efficient one. I can't let them see what my cupboards are really like. Nothing they say or do can hurt you now, the light points out. You're done being the sum of other people's opinions. I haven't sent my goodbyes properly. No goodbye is ever complete. How can it be? Do we have to go right away? Can I just, you have time. The voice fills with compassion. Go ahead, take a look. And then this disembodied spirit moves a little closer to people. A few people are poring over a newspaper. I take a look. Oh dear God, really? They've used my passport photo? I look like a 3-day-old Italy. They know how particular I am about my photos. I have to look good. All my life I've been told I'm pretty. I can't stand this. And what are those words? Blah, 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 passed away this evening. Okay, but so bland. And what's this? That which cannot be cured is endured. What? Is that a lament or a comment on their life with me? That's what they came up with for me? Me, who collected quotations in notebook after notebook from the time I was 14, who prided herself on having the best invitation wordings and thank you notes in town, and couldn't someone pull that sari over my feet with the toes tied together? I've been ill. I haven't had pedicures for a while. I suddenly begin to shudder, and the light, watchful, wraps itself around me. And then there's a lot of conversation between them, and the spirit goes to where her sisters are. My sisters are weeping. The second one, a little more loudly than the first. Well, that figures. She's always been a chunk of ice, so needs to fall back on drama to compensate for all that gigantic ice-centric personality. I knew, she sobs, I knew she wouldn't last long. Something told me yesterday. I felt it. We're sisters, no? I'm like that, no? You know? Seriously? The woman hardly visited me all the times I was in and out of hospital. Always some excuse or the other. Her in-laws were visiting, her children were visiting, her cat died, the house had to be painted, her cook ran away. I hover closer to my quieter sister as she sits, silent, tight-lipped. I'm sorry for drowning your doll in our grandmother's well that summer, I whisper. And she raises her head suddenly, brushing her hand on her right shoulder, as if she felt something touch her. And then the story goes on, and in the end, they come to pick her up, the 4 people who have to pick her up. And the light says, look, you don't have to be here. Let me take you to a quieter place. Don't worry, you'll still see them. You'll be around here for a few days before final departure. I poise stiffly for takeoff. What are you doing? The light asks, stretching into a grin. Well, excuse me, I look a question. We've always been taught that up is the direction to pray, whatever. The light smiles. It's right here. See, just a soft wave. Come with me. It's really very simple and you will be fine. I follow. The light is right. It is so simple. I'm fine. And now there's light everywhere.
Thank you, Ranjitha. Only you could make a dead woman so relatable. You know exactly what
Very
she's saying. You
bizarre.
relate to it. I mean, I don't want to sound, gloomy, but I'm sure if I die, I will be having the same thoughts. Thank you.
Well, I'm hoping there's humor wherever we go.
Yes. Do we have time, or is it time for questions?
So just about 9 minutes, yeah.
So what's your next project? Are short stories brewing in your mind?
So let's see, hopefully. Yeah.
So as I asked you, is it going to be short stories or novels? Novel.
Maybe short stories again, Sushi. Let's see how it works out. We'll see. The stories also tend to decide, no? Stories also have their own minds and they tend to decide which way to go. So let's see.
But you've started working on something, some ideas.
Some ideas, yes.
There are many questions.
Oh, okay, I'll stop now. Okay. Thanks, Ranjitha. It was good fun.
Thank you, Sushi. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you. Should I check out the questions or is anyone?
Yeah, normally Jayanti does it.
Jayanti does it, Jayanti?
Maybe you can read out from the chat box and you can answer yours.
Sriram, you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, it's Sriram. Sriram, are you asking the questions?
Yeah,
Okay.
some of them are only complimenting both of you on how nice you look and all that, which we take for granted and move on. There is somebody who says, congratulations, madam. I have read Office Chai and liked the book a lot.
Oh, wow.
This is
Thank
K.
you.
Ravichandar. So, Ranjitha, take a bow.
Well, thank you.
Okay. There is a question. I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but let me come to that. Does your style of writing change with every short story to bring out the true substance of the narrative? This is Kannan Chakravarti.
It does. I think there's an automatic, it's not possibly very conscious. I don't think you consciously change the way you write. There will be there will be one part which will be you and that stays consistent, but there will be some nuances, some changes that will come. And can short story writers become regular fiction writers? Yes, I think so. I think they can, certainly.
Okay, and then what is your favorite short story and does experience help you innovate your stories?
Favorite short story from this collection, I really won't be able to choose, but does experience help you innovate? Yes, for sure. Experience, observations, life, everything helps you to innovate. Everything helps you to get inspired, to get ideas, all of it. Yes, certainly.
Were you, I have a question, Ranjitha. Did you have fixed hours of the day when you sat and wrote, or what was it?
No, I'm not disciplined like that at all. It's like anytime, whenever I can, a couple of hours here, a couple of hours there. I wish I could do that fixed writing thing. And
I do have a question, Ranjitha.
Yeah.
Did you finish any short story in one sitting?
Maybe it was the Madras Bhasha one, because I think
It
that
just flowed.
I think that took the shortest time. In my memory, that took the shortest time to write, yes.
I had a whale of a time trying to identify all the characters in the book whom I thought I knew. But I'm not going to tell you who they were and all that. We can discuss that at length sometime when we meet. What will be your advice for young and fresh writers?
Oh my goodness. I think that would be very, presumptuous and pompous on my part to go around giving advice. If I were to say anything at all, I would say sit down, write, and keep writing. That's it. Are we done?
Yeah, I think those were the questions.
Over to Shanta.
Ranjitha and Sushi, before Shanta's vote of thanks, my duty on behalf of Madras Musings the book will reach you for having been part of the event.
Fantastic.
And then, in addition to that, Coco Treat will be sending you a box of chocolates, each one of you, because they want to send it to all those who put together Madras Week events.
Fantastic.
The
Okay.
chocolates will reach you much faster than the book, which is still in some, it's in a Kafkaesque world of when it will come to us, and then we'll have to reach it to you. But the chocolates, I presume, will come tomorrow or day after. So that is where it is. Thank you so much for having
Thank you. Thank you
together
so
this
very
event,
much. Thank you.
and the book club.
You.
Thank you, Sushila and Ranjitha. It's been wonderful to see you both.
Thank you. Great to see you. Thank you.
Shanta, is there?
Sriram,
Hi, sir.
You have to unmute, ma.
Shanta, please unmute.
Yes. I think it's been such a pleasure to have heard a different voice from a familiar face this evening. Not the voice that would introduce speakers, authors to the Madras Book Club in the most warmly inviting tones, or offer the customary vote of thanks in a non-customary way, candid, appreciative, complimentary. Obviously, she couldn't do either of these, and so we've had the pleasure of hearing her delightful authorial voice. And let me diverge a minute to thank Sushila at this stage for, handling this interview in such a fine and splendid manner. Such probing questions, how, why? I think that was perfect, because not only did you take us through the whole book, but it enabled you to, it enabled Ranjitha to go into the details of what were the ingredients that went into making this half a kilo of mixture. And I think in the process, we got to know so much about her, not just as a writer, but as a reader, as a person, her views, her attitudes, her philosophy of life, when she talked about relationships. So I think a lot of the credit for this refreshingly lucid, wonderful evening goes to Sushila. And I'd like to thank Sushila for that.
Thank you so much.
Back to Ranjitha, I think, her columns in Madras Musings, which even those of us who may not have read the short stories yet, reflect her highly perceptive links with Chennai and with life in Chennai. And I think her natural poise is transferred to her writing, a quiet sense of fun, subtle nuances. And I gather that reviewers have commented on these very features in her half a kilo of mixture, that there's an acceptance of life, life's challenges, non-judgmental, and there's grace and optimism, a wide range of emotions that goes through these. And I think we couldn't have had a book so appropriate to help to celebrate Madras, because the landscape is largely South Indian, Chennai-centric milieu, but I think it speaks to everyone. The stories speak to everyone, and therefore, even if you're not a Madrasi, to harken back and love the city you love, if you have an open mind, then you begin to love the city. We recognize many of these characters as they leap out of the pages, and I'd just like to read from a couple of reviewers, one from Mumbai and another from US, who had this to say. You realize that the Madras you lived in after watching the characters in Ranjitha's book, you realize that the Madras you lived in years ago and loved envelops you with hoops of steel, however far away you are. Phrases like okay va, pakoda paithyam, and many others you will discover are a constant reminder that you carry a large part of Madras with you wherever in the world you may be. That Ranjitha has offered her readers the sumptuous spread over 15 stories itself points to the author's spirit. Her joy of life, her non-judgmental attitude, her loving, clear delineation of characters, and keenly observant. How many times during the course of this evening did she talk about people, observations of people? And I think hers is a listening ear that picks up every syllable of the Madras Bhasha. There is no denying that Ranjitha, endowed with all these attributes, is also a natural flair for writing. Evocative words, crisp style, but all this must have been chiseled and beaten into fine shape over the 25 years that she worked with Mr. Muthaiya. Over all these many book projects, including co-authoring the book Office Chai Planters Brew. And it suddenly struck me that she perhaps was continuing that Muthaiya-Ranjitha collaboration when she titled this collection Half a Kilo of Mixture, because she got the brew out, you know, she got the chai out and she got the latte out, and now it was time to serve the mixture. Mixture means meets different needs. It comes in handy on different occasions. We dip into it as our mood goes. Some for the peanuts, people like me grab the cashews, and yet others the sweet raisins. But I think after our conversation this evening, I'm sure many will go to try and grab the full bag of half a kilo of mixture. So thank you, Ranjitha. Thank you, Sushila, for a wonderful evening. Please unmute yourselves to give the ladies a fantastic applause. It's also applauding the city of Madras that we all love. Super, Ranjitha. And the announcement, one announcement, our next hello.
Excuse me.
I need to make an announcement about the next program that will be on 15th September at 7 p.m. One of the authors of the book, Kamala Harris and the Race of Indian Americans, is M.R. Ramaswamy. He also founded the Indiaspora.org in 2012 in the USA. Now he will be discussing this book with Tarun Basu. This will be on 15th September at 7 p.m. Please note the change in timing. We normally meet at 6. This will be not at the usual 6, but at 7 p.m. on 15th September. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a wonderful
Thank you,
meeting.
Sriram, Sushila, and Ranjitha.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
bye,
you.
bye.
Thank you, Madras Musings. Thank you, all of you. Thanks, Sushi. Thank you so very much.
Thanks for calling me. Thank you.
Thank you.